So the first thing that you want to do is head over to botpress.com and create yourself an account. Next thing you'll do is you'll find yourself in a place that looks like this. This is known as a Botpress dashboard, and before you create a bot, I will give you a quick tour of everything in here. First things first, there's the integration tab over here. This will show you all the current integrations that you have connected to your bot. But as you see, I have no integrations, and so it's prompting me to set up a bot right now. So you can go ahead and just hit skip and it will automatically create a bot for you. But first, we want to come back over into the workspace so that I can explain to you what integrations are. As you can see, there's no integrations, but basically integrations are connections to external apps. So for example, if you want to connect your bot to WhatsApp or to Instagram, you will have to install an integration to that bot, which you will then see over here. The next tab is usage. This is basically an interface for you to look at your bot's usage of AI spend, as well as incoming messages and events. Let's say these limits are not enough for you, you need more money. All you have to do is come into increase limits, and then it will take you to a page like this, and then it will give you a quick summary of your AI spend limit, which you can increase simply by adding stuff over here. However, first you'll need to add your payment information so that it would automatically bill you. You can also add a few other add-ons, such as an extra bot to your workspace, table rows in case you're handling a lot of data, collaborators, and a few other really cool stuff down here. Next, you can also choose which plan you want to use. Right now, I'm on the pay-as-you-go plan, and it's usually the most commonly used. However, you may want to upgrade to another plan if you need advanced features such as live agent handoff and a few other really cool things that these plans offer. So now that we're done there, let's go straight into the studio where we'll start building the bot. You can do that by clicking this little icon over here to go inside. First, when you load in, you'll find yourself in a page like this. Basically, this is the home page of your bot. You want to click on the instructions tab and first give your bot a set of instructions. Just be as clear as possible. Tell it what it's going to do, how it's going to do it, and why it is doing it as well. Great, so all you have to do is click workflows and you'll find yourself in the main part of the studio. I'll start by closing this and closing this as well, so I can give you a full tour of how the studio is. Now you can think of the studio as a huge football field, and you can add these things known as nodes. So every single time you see a rectangular box, that is called a node. So these are known as autonomous nodes over here, with a little purple autonomous text at the top that basically tells you it's an autonomous node. But to create a standard node, which is this, all you have to do is right click anywhere on the canvas and you'll see the option to create a standard node, autonomous node, and add a few other things. So basically I'll just click standard node and you'll see it will create that over here, and it will number it as accordingly as well, depending on what the last created the standard node is called. On the right side, you'll see that there's this thing called the emulator, which I've opened back up. This is basically where you test your bot from. So let's say you finished building your bot. This is now your interface to be able to test it within Botpress. All you do is type a message here and you can begin to chat with it accordingly. To reset a conversation, simply tap over here, restart conversation, or hit Control Enter, and it will also restart a conversation as well. The next thing that we will go over is the inspector over here. Now the inspector is used to inspect different nodes and different cards. So for example, when I click on this, you can see that the inspector changes and basically it switches to allow you to edit whatever node or card that you've clicked on. So you can think of the inspector as the editor for whichever place you click on in here. So let's say I click on this card over here, the search knowledge card, the autonomous node card. You can see it has switched to search knowledge bases, which is the name of this card. And now I have the ability to edit it and give it instructions, etc. When I click on the autonomous node part, you can see it has switched to the instructions to allow me to enter instructions into the autonomous node, as well as change other key settings about the autonomous node. Up here in the top right is the Explore Hub section. This is basically where you find integration. So let's say you want to integrate to WhatsApp. You'd come in here and then you would install that integration to your bot. And once that's installed, you would then have the ability to use it within your bot. Next, we will move on to this book icon over here. This is known as the knowledge base section. From here, you'll be able to add knowledge to your bot, and you can do so in multiple formats such as website, document, table, web search, rich text, etc., which we will do later on. This is the table section. You can now create tables. So this is if you want your bot to hold certain data that is best held in a table, you would create the table over here, and then you can reference the table on knowledge bases for your bot to refer to it. Now, when you click the actions button over here, your whole screen will not change, but instead it will change from the left panel. So you'll see a change over here. An action is basically a short snippet of code that your bot has access to, that whenever it is called, the bot executes it. So for example, an action might be to transcript the conversation and send it via email to a certain email. Now we can create that action with code, and then whenever we call that action, it's kind of like having a card. The bot will execute that action wherever it is. So wherever we place that card, wherever we place that instruction, the bot will execute that certain piece of code so that the action is executed as well. Once again, when you click on the agents thing, it's very similar to the actions tab in the sense that it doesn't change your whole screen. Instead, it will just change the left panel and you'll see the agents that your bot has access to. Now, what are agents? Agents are basically tools that your bot uses to do certain things. So you'll see there's the vision agent. That's the tool that your bot uses to read images, to basically understand images, vision. And then there's the summary agent. That's a tool that your bot uses to generate summaries of conversations. There's the personality agent. That's the tool that your agent uses to apply a certain personality to every response it gives. And then there's a policy agent. That's a tool that your bot will use to apply a policy to every response it gives. What does a policy mean? So for example, if you never want your bot to refer to your competitors, or you never want you never want your bot to mention a certain product, you would put that in the policy so that whenever it does, no matter what it is asked, no matter how the user provokes or prompts it, it never does the forbidden action. So it basically sticks to the policy. The translator agent is basically there for your bot to be able to translate its messages into different languages, which is really cool. And then the knowledge agent, perhaps the most important one, is the one that allows your bot to access the knowledge base and use information in the knowledge base to answer user questions. So for now, the only ones that you need to turn on really, you can turn off the vision agent and you can turn on the knowledge agent because we will use it later, as well as the personality agent. We will use that too. Hooks. Hooks, again, are very similar to actions, except you can't move them around. They're kind of fixed. So it's basically an action that happens at different stages of the conversation between the user and the bot. So first of all, you can add them at different points. They're basically, like you've seen, a bunch of code, and then you place them at different stages, such as before an incoming message, after an incoming message, before an outgoing message, before LLMs execution. That's basically before the AI does a task, after the AI does a task, etc., etc. So what this means is, let's say you want your bot to always do something after receiving a user message. This is where you do that, because it would reference this code every single time after receiving a user message or before receiving a user message, etc. The library has been deprecated, so I will not go through that. But if you click down to install integrations, it will show you all the integrations that your bot currently has access to. Now, these integrations over here are the default except for WhatsApp. So most likely when you create your bot, you'll have access to these. What are they? These are LLMs. Most of them are LLMs. So Anthropic is an LLM, Cerebrus is an LLM, Fireworks AI, Google AI, and OpenAI. LLMs are large language models. They are basically, let's just call them AIs for the simplicity of this video, and they allow you to have access to the different models that these companies produce so that your bot can use them. Versions down here. This will give you access to the versions of your bot. So every time you publish your bot, it will create a new version over here. And what this allows you to do is basically revert to an older version in the case that you need to do so. Bot settings allows you to edit your bot. So you can change this name over here. I can change this to test bot. And you can also change some other stuff about it, such as the inactivity timeout, which is how long your bot can go for without activity before ending a conversation. Node repetition limit is how many times your bot can flow through a certain node, which will make sense later. Right now it may not, but just remember it. It's basically a limit to how many times your bot can flow through a certain node before an error will be triggered. And then use the Botpress client. This basically allows you to access the Botpress client from the execute code card, which basically expands your bot's abilities in terms of using if you decide to use code. However, you don't need to worry about this for now. You also do not need to worry about configuration variables, as I will explain them in a later video. Next, Botpress has this little find tool over here to help you find things in your bot. Really cool, really simple. And then you can access live support by clicking this down here. You can access resources by clicking this down here. And then this down here allows you to change some preferences about your interface, such as dark, light, whether you want items to snap to the grid or pan on scroll. Over here, you'll see a little tab called variables. Now, for those of you who haven't done computer science or anything computing related, any kind of programming, variables are basically little rooms in which you can store data. So you can think of a variable as a box or a room in which you can store any kind of data inside. In Botpress, there are 4 types of variables. There are bot variables, there are conversation variables, there are user variables, and there are workflow variables, which I will explain right here. So a bot variable is the same for all users interacting with a bot. So what this means is that if x is equal to 1 and x is a bot variable, all users who interact with that bot will experience x as 1. An example of a bot variable will be the bot name. That is a bot variable. It's not explicit in here that it is, but it is the bot variable because no matter which user interacts with this bot, it will still be called new agent. The next type of variable we will look at is a user variable. A user variable is a variable specific to a user only. So what this means is that I can have a different user variable from you. So the way you create them is you come to this little plus icon, and then you give your variable a name. So let me say email, and then you select the scope and you change this to user, conversation, bot, or workflow, but I will select user in this case. You can also select the variable type from string, which is just a random assortment of characters, letters, numbers, etc., to boolean, which is either true or false, to number, which has to be a digit, and then date, which will have to be a date in RFC 339 format, and then object as well, which is now a bit more JavaScript programmer kind of thing, and then list entity, pattern entity, target, array, etc. So you will likely not have to worry about these 5 for the time being. However, they do come in really handy when you're building bots later. So as you can see, I've created the variable and I'll hit enter, and it has created that over here. Now, why did I set email as a user variable? Because I want my email to be recognized as something that is mine. So when you set something as a user variable, the bot recognizes it, associates it to a certain user. So something like an email, a name, a phone number, you would want to set those kind of details as user variables so that whenever the bot interacts with that user, it recognizes those variables, email, phone number, etc., things that don't change about a user, as related to that specific user. Next, we have conversation variables as well. What a conversation variable is it's only there for that specific conversation. So let's say I set email as a conversation variable. I would be able to access it during this one conversation that I'm having with a bot. However, as soon as that conversation ends and a new conversation starts, I would no longer have access to that variable and it would once again be empty. This means that, for example, if I had stored my email as a conversation variable and I begin a new conversation, the bot will no longer know my email and I will have to re-enter it, which is inconvenient. And that's why things like email, usernames, and other data that relates to a user, you'd store as a user variable. A workflow variable is pretty much the same, except it relates to a specific workflow. Now, every single tab that you see here on the left is known as a workflow, and you will always start in the main workflow. So a workflow variable is a variable that is only specific to this workflow that I am in. So if I create a workflow variable, it's usually the default one over here. I can name it something such as response and create that over here. You'll see it will show up as a workflow. What this means is if I leave this workflow as a user, all the variables will be reset. So once again, the reason you can't store something like the user's name or email as a workflow variable, or at least I wouldn't recommend it, is because if the user transitions out of this workflow, which I will show you how that happens later on, when the user comes back into the workflow, the bot no longer remembers their name or their email because the variables are all reset. Now coming back over here to the canvas, you can just right click this and delete it. I want to explain to you what these different nodes are. So like I said, this is an autonomous node and this is a standard node. Now, Each node, you can think of it as a block, as a piece of the bot's brain. And inside that piece, you can input specific instructions for the bot to execute something. Now, when you create nodes and you link them up, you will be able to connect them via these little dots that come into and go out of them. So you'll be able to do that. Once you do that, you've created a path. So this is known as a path. Each of these is known as nodes, and these are known as exit points. So when this little dot that comes out of this is an exit point. What you'll notice is that autonomous nodes don't have exit points by default because they are kind of meant to autonomously handle the conversation so that the user never has to exit. However, you can create an exit point in an autonomous node by selecting add card, searching for the transition card, clicking on it, and then just giving it instructions such as end conversation. So basically the way this works is once you've added the card, you need to give the node instructions, the autonomous node instructions of when to use this transition. So for example, here you can see I've said when the user wants to end the conversation, transition to the end conversation card below. So that means if I'm conversing with a bot and I tell it I want to end the conversation, it will transition automatically out through here. So now I'll move on to the cards section of this tutorial. Basically, cards are pre-built custom pieces of code that Botpress has made for you to use to do certain actions. So you can access them by clicking this little add card icon, and you'll see something pop up on your left hand side with all these different cards. Now I know it looks overwhelming at first, but it's actually pretty simple. At the top, you have all the cards for outputting data onto the chat. So this is text, images, videos, audio, etc. And then down here, we have cards that execute code. So really the only one that executes code is this one up here. The rest of these just allow you to interact with the table that you have in Botpress. But with this card, the execute code card, which I've added, it's literally just a blank page where you can input code in JavaScript that the bot can use to perform different actions. You can also interact with this little AI section over here and tell it to create certain pieces of code for you just to save time. But I usually use ChatGPT because it gives me a better explanation of what it's doing, as well as whenever it makes mistakes, I can easily prompt it to correct the mistakes as well. Moving on from there, if we scroll further down, we can see a few other cards for different things. Now you'll see these WhatsApp cards over here. These are related to the WhatsApp integration. The way Botpress works is you have to first install the integration to get access to the cards. So for example, if you wanted to get access to the Airtable cards to allow you to interact with your Airtable database, you would need to first install them by coming up here to the Explore Hub section. And you'll find a few other cards down here. Some of these will be pre-installed for you because the integrations are already on your bot, such as Google AI, Cerebras, and probably OpenAI as well. When we scroll further down, you'll see a few other things such as improvement. This basically allows you to add improvement and feedback to your bot, but I will not be covering that in this tutorial. And further down the list, we have a few other cards for creating charts, etc., and some more AI cards down here. Now what I'll be covering next is at the very bottom of this card section. Over here, we have 3 AI cards. These basically allow you to do tasks with AI. The first one is just a basic AI task. So when you click on that, you can see you give it instructions, you give it an input, and then you give it an output. So for example, in the input, you might give it something like the user's name. Then in the instructions, you might tell it generate a custom message to the user saying good afternoon to them using their name, which is stored in the input. Then it would generate that message and store that in the output. Next thing we have is the AI generate text card. This basically just generates text. So you just give it a prompt. You can also give it a dynamic prompt by clicking at and then adding a variable. So for example, we could add at workflow.response, and then whatever value, ideally the prompt is stored in workflow.response, is what would be used to generate the text. And of course, the output would be stored in whatever variable you choose over here. Next, we have the AI transition card, another really key card for new users. This was my favorite card starting out. Basically, it allows you to send the user down different paths depending on certain text. So let's say we want to categorize text that's in workflow.response. Once again, you come in here, you just add the variable at workflow.response, and then we add category. So let's say workflow.response contains the user's response to the question, do you like dogs, cats, or rabbits? Over here in categories, all we would have to do is add dogs, cats, and then rabbits. And then you'll see 3 exit points have been created next to the card. What this allows us to do is transition to different places. So let's say we wanted to come up here if they like dogs, we can then go up here. And let's say we wanted to come up here if they like cats, then go there, and then rabbits would go down here. And that's how you can begin to create logic in your bots. So the next thing that we'll be looking at are the capture information cards. I'll start with the most basic one, which is the raw input card. What this raw input does is it has no AI integrated into it, so it just takes the user's raw input. Therefore, if you're to ask the user the question, how was your day, for example, it will take the user's full response. So if the user says my day was great, it will take that full response. However, some of these other custom cards over here extract certain pieces of details from the user's response but don't take the whole response. So for example, let's look at the email address one. It would ask the user, what is your email? And then it will extract only the user's email from their response and store that in the variable. So for example, if the user responded with my email is, it would only extract the actual email without extracting the my email is. So these are really useful if you're collecting key pieces of data that you want to store in certain user variables. The next card that we have down here is the query knowledge base agent. What this does is it allows you to query your knowledge base for certain answers to user questions. So up here is where you'd put the question. The first thing that you'd have to do is select this little X up here. What this does is it makes the query variable. So what that means is that the query can change depending on what is inside the variable that you put over here. So by clicking this, you now have access to putting variables within this section, and you have to take note of the specific notation you should use, which is, so let me select that first, 2 curly brackets and then input a variable. But because we only have a workflow variable, let's just put in workflow.response, and then you'll see it go green to tell you that it has detected that that's a variable. You can then select which knowledge base you want it to query from, which you can also make dynamic by selecting the X. And then of course you can put the answer variable ID. This is basically where the output would be stored. And then you can output the variable so that the user gets their answer. So then you would just come over here, add a card, and then you would add just a text card and add workflow.response. Or in fact, it would probably be better if you created a different variable for the response. So this would be answer, workflow.answer. And then in here, you just change it to at workflow.answer. And then up here, you just come in here and change this to answer. So basically, it will query the user's question, which will be in workflow.response. It will store the output in workflow.answer. And then out here, you can output the answer to the user using a text card. So the last card I'll be covering is called the log card. Basically, this writes a certain bit of text to your logs, to the Botpress logs, which are down here. The logs are basically a large notebook that the bot uses to keep track of every action that it does. So why is this card useful? It's useful because you can place it at different points in conversation to kind of write down on the notebook that the bot has reached that certain stage. So they can act as checkpoints essentially. That way, if your bot bugs out or encounters an error, you can kind of track back by looking at the logs and see which checkpoints it reached and understand where the issue is. So for example, you would say at this point, user has started conversation. And then you can change it from you can change the level that it is. You can change it from a debug to an info to a warning to an error. So for example, let me put it as a warning. And if I come into the emulator and I say hi, you can see it will warn me over here. User has started conversation. That's why you see the little yellow icon. And then if we come in here, you can see that there is a log card on the logs. So basically this has written to my logs and it's saying warn, log card, action, user has started conversation, which is the exact text that I told it to output. So now I'll just explain the basics of building on Botpress. To create a node, you right click anywhere on the canvas and then you can select either standard or autonomous. Let's go with standard. And then to create a path, you just have to link the output, which will always be on the right side of a node. So this is the output, this is an output, and then the inputs are always on the left. So this is an input, this is an input, this is an input. So basically your bot's logic flows from left to right. So you can just link those up, and then we can add another standard node and link that up as well. So that's basically how you build on Botpress. And from then on, you kind of think of these as little pieces of the bot's brain that you're linking up based on different things. And when you add things like the AI transition, you can then begin to add logic to your bot by, for example, adding categories such as up. Let me just put up, down, left, and right. And now you can then begin to transition to different places depending on different factors that the user has given to us, which we will collect by using the input cards that I just went over. Now, you can have multiple paths. Each line that you see over here is a path. You can have multiple paths going into an input, but you cannot have multiple paths going out of an output. What that means is, for example, if I want to come from here to standard 2, and I also want to come from here to standard 2, yes, that's possible. But if I try to exit from here to this standard, and I also try to exit from up here to this standard, that's not possible. I can only exit to one place, but I can enter from 2 different places. And then, of course, like I said, you can then begin to use the AI transition cards paired with the inputs that you would collect from the user. So for example, you could have a raw input card that asks the user which direction, and it would store the answer in workflow.response. And then over here in the AI transition, we would give it the text workflow.response, and we would tell it to categorize it into one of these categories over here. And now if we build this out by adding an appropriate destination for every section, we can see that the bot will transition to the correct place. So if I say hi, it will say which direction. If I say up, you'll see that it will flow up through here after the AI task has completed running. So you can see it has gone into standard 3 because that's the exit point of the up selection. Now you'll begin to notice that this is already getting kind of messy. And so Botpress has this feature known as workflows. If you come over here to the left hand panel and you select this button, create workflow, you can basically create a whole new canvas and start afresh. And then you can connect these different canvases to each other so that you can access them and send users through them at different points of the conversation. So let's say we want to call this canvas the workflow the second. All you do is give it a name, and now it's created. And then in here, you can build whatever you want. And if we come back into main, up here, we can add a card that transitions to that workflow. So once you've added a workflow, if you scroll to the bottom, you should be able to see it over here under flow logic. And so you just select second, and then that card will appear. And what it will do is, as soon as the user enters this node and reaches this card, it will send them out of this workflow and into this second workflow over here, and then take them along the flow, whatever happens, whatever you input. And after they exit from here, they would be output right back over here where they would be spat out from this exit point. And so they can either exit up here, but if you've not connected this, it will flow down into the default exit point of the node. So for example, this will then come out like this. So once a user reaches here, they are shot onto the second workflow, and then whatever happens over here happens. And once they exit here, they can come back over here and continue. So you can basically condense a whole entire workflow into a single card by creating it over here, and then just having the card which you would then put in the different workflow. That way, when users enter here, they are automatically routed to a different place, saving you space and keeping your bot organized, but then also allowing you to kind of categorize your bot. So you can have a workflow maybe for collecting the user's details. You might have another workflow for saying thank you to the user. You might have a workflow for querying user inputs, etc., etc. That's where you kind of know what the user is doing wherever they go. Now, this is not part of Botpress. This is a software called Freeform on Mac that lets you create flowcharts and other drawings. But the reason I'm here is to show you what a bot plan looks like before you start building. I would recommend that before you start any project, you either draw it out on paper or on some software like this. Make your plan so that you know exactly what you're doing. That way, when you start building, you can basically build according to what you've drawn out here. So you would start by building the user intro, then the new user intro, then the old user intro, then the decision, etc., etc. That way, when you're in the studio, you're not running around doing different tasks that you and kind of freestyling your way around things, because that will likely lead to a bot that doesn't flow properly, but then it will also constantly leave you confused and unsatisfied by what you have because you're not following a plan. So you'll never get to recognize when you've actually done something right. So you're constantly trying to fix something, change something, instead of just sticking to a plan. So whenever you start a project, stick to a plan, draw it out first, and then begin to work from there. If you're a business owner and you're watching this, I'm doing a free demonstration where I'll basically build a mini bot for you for free, and you can get a feel for how it would work for your business. All you have to do is make a booking using the Calendly link in the description below. And as soon as I receive your booking, I'll reach out to you and we can jump on a call. I can walk you through the demo. If you love it, we can move ahead and see how I can get something like this installed for your business as soon as possible. If you're an agency owner or a builder on Botpress and need some help with Botpress, you can also book a consultation with me using the same link below. Simply book a time, and once again, I'll reach out to you with a way forward from there. Having said that, I'll now show you some of the basic actions that you will need to start building on Botpress. Number 1, creating nodes, which we've covered. Number 2 is adding text to the nodes for the node to output. So we can set that up over here. Just click on a text card and then add the message you want the bot to send. So for example, I've added the text, hello, my name is testbot. And as soon as I start the conversation, you'll see that that's the text that the bot outputs. The next thing that we'll look at is giving the user options. So if you come to add card, you can kind of give the user options to select from and transition them to different places based on their selection. All you have to do is come into single choice, add that card, and then ask the user the appropriate question. So you can see I've added a question, do you like cats, dogs, or rabbits? This essentially works just like the AI transition card that I showed you earlier, but it's not as powerful when it comes to detecting which selection the user actually made. So the user has to make a selection or a statement that's very close to what the question asks. So over here is where you would put your items. So you would start with cats, dogs, and then rabbits. And just like that, you'll see 3 exit points appear. So now we can test the bot. Start with an intro message. You can see it said, hi, my name is testbot, as the text card says, and then it has provided the question and button options. So this card outputs the options in buttons, but the AI task card does not do that. It just asks a raw question and then it uses AI to process the user's response. So the user can either click a button or they can type out their response, and either way the bot would be able to differentiate to where they want to go. So if I say I like rabbits, you can see that it has led me down here to this section and it has outputted the text, you like rabbits. So when it comes to ending conversations, there's 3 main ways that your conversation can end. The first way is through an error. This happens if there's an error somewhere along the pathway that the bot encounters. What it will do is it will automatically stop, and then it will log that error to the logs, and then it will transition to this error workflow, which is a default workflow. So basically the bot is routed here on error. Every time it encounters an error, it is routed through here. And this is useful because you can put an error message here, or you can add something like a webhook that automatically sends the error details to your email so that you understand what kind of error happened. So there's many things you can use this for, but it routes them through here and then it ends the conversation. The second way that your conversation can end is through timeout. Over here in your bot settings on the bottom left, you have the opportunity to select an inactivity timeout in minutes. So basically this is the number of minutes of inactivity before the session ends. So after 30 minutes of no activity between the user or the bot, the conversation will automatically flow into this timeout workflow, which is another default workflow, where you can once again put in a message such as, hi, are you still there, to ask the user if they're still there, and then you can send them back maybe over here. But usually I just leave this blank and allow the conversation to end, but perhaps you can add something such as a card that automatically generates a transcript and sends that out to your database to transcript the conversation, which is just timed out. And lastly, the final way that your conversation can end is through an intentional end. So if you intentionally direct the conversation to end using this card over here. So this is an end card. You can create another one by right clicking and hitting end, and you'll notice another end card pops in so that you can use them across your canvas. So let's say you have a bit of logic up here, you can connect that to an end card. So let's say that was this, we could connect that up here, and then we would also connect this down here. When you connect a path to an end card, what it does is it automatically sends the user to this conversation end section. This is very much similar to these workflows. It's another default workflow, except it's for when the conversation was intentionally ended. So in here, you can have something like a thank you message to the user, or once again, a transcript of a conversation that has ended, so that you can kind of review the conversations that your users are having within the bot. Now, many new builders rush to use the autonomous node because it looks like the easiest, right? You just give it a bunch of instructions and you tell it to do something for you. However, the problem with this is that it is almost always not going to give you the exact responses that you want. So it's very good at being creative. However, it's not good at being specific to what you want, and therefore you need to gain the skill of using these autonomous nodes in parallel with standard nodes together, or generating really precise autonomous node instructions, which I will show you how to do now. So in here, I've pasted the recommended Botpress autonomous node instruction structure, and I will input the link to that, to their documents on this topic as well. So basically, you want to give the autonomous node an identity, a scope, a responsibility, a response style, an ability, guardrails, instructions, scenarios for when to escalate, and then when to close the conversation as well. But then of course you can edit this to make it suit whatever you're building. So for example, in my case, I usually have a section known as tasks, where I kind of tell the autonomous node what its task actually is, rather than just having it chat with the users, because I build bots that convert leads, and therefore I have to tell the autonomous node what to do, how to act, and what its job is in pushing the lead forward down the sales process. However, these first 3 categories are a good start, I would recommend, and I would probably add another one known as policy, and in here you might add something such as never talk about, and then you have the competitor's name in here, or some other policies that you want your bot to follow throughout its conversations. Another important skill that you will likely need is collecting and storing user data. So let's say we want to collect the user's name. The first thing that we would do is come down here into the capture information section and find the name card, and we would add that over here. And then we would simply ask, what is your name? And we would want to store that in a variable. So after adding the question, you would come over here and just type in the variable you want to add. So you want to add name, and then create name. For some reason, it doesn't let you create the variable first and then add it. You have to create the variable as you're adding it. So just type in the variable name and then hit create, and you'll see it will pop up down here. However, this is a workflow variable, so we can just edit that and change that to a user variable, because obviously the user's name will never change. So we'll have to store that as a user variable. Now, when we interact with the bot, you'll see that it outputs the text and then it asks for my name. If I output my name, it will store that as an object inside the Botpress section. So if we come over here, you'll see that it has stored 2 keys in the name object, and when you click on the arrow, you can see first Enoch, last Omunu. Therefore, if I want to refer to any of those, I have to use a special kind of format to output it, which I'll show you right now. So when you come into a text card and you want to output something that's in an object, first of all, you would not be able to use the @ symbol to output the variable, because this would just output the entire variable. Instead, we would use the double curly brackets notation. So you come in here, add 2 curly brackets, and then you would just go user dot name. So you can see when I test that out, it outputs the entire object over here, first Enoch, last now, which is not very pleasant to the user. So what you need to do is call the specific key that stores my name, which is first. So you would come in here and you would add user.name dot first. So by adding a dot first, you're basically telling it to look at the user variables, to look at the name variable, and then to look at the first property of the name variable, which stores my first name. And as you can see, it has output my name, Enoch, you like cats. And you can do the same thing for the last name as well. However, not all of the capture information cards are like this. Some of them will just store the inputs that the user has given as a variable. So for example, number, email address, phone number would store that as a normal variable that is not an object, but it would probably be a number instead for this one. And then email address would probably be a string. So once you've collected data like the user's first and last name, they will now be permanently stored for this specific user on Botpress. So what that means is whenever I interact with a bot over WhatsApp using that specific WhatsApp account that I input my name as, it will remember me as Enoch Omunu. But if I was to switch to a different number, or if someone new was to text the bot, it would not have their name details, and it would collect their name details and then store them, which you can also now reference later on throughout the bot if you want to perhaps refer to the user as their name, or maybe you want to send the user an email later down the conversation. You can do that as well, as long as you've collected that data from them. So now we will be looking at knowledge. If you come over here to this book icon on the far left, we can add a knowledge base to the bot. Now you can add a knowledge base by clicking this button up here, and then you can add sources to the knowledge base by selecting something from one of these options. So you can add a website where you'd input the website link. You can add a document where you'd upload the document that is one of these formats listed over here. Then you can add a table, which you will start by creating. Then you can add a web search. Basically, this allows your bot to perform a search on the internet, and I shall remove that now. And then you can also go ahead and add a rich text document, which basically allows you to paste text directly onto the bot's knowledge base. So I'll start by doing that. It's the easiest, and basically it will open up a rich text file which I can select and then paste text. So I've generated a fictitious knowledge base of fruits at a shop, and I can paste that as plain text, a code block, or rich format, but rich format is the most consistent. So you can see apples, this, bananas, this, mango, this, etc, etc. And then up here I'll just give it a title such as fruits at my shop. Do keep in mind that the more organized your knowledge base is, the faster your bot will be at searching it and providing information from it. You can think of it as if you gave someone a dictionary with all the words jumbled up. So for example, Z in the middle of the dictionary, and then A at the very end and C at the beginning. It will just mess them up if they're looking for specific words. But if you order everything, if you add specific categories for certain things, it makes your bot much faster at querying the knowledge base for information. So now that we've added the knowledge base, we can come back over here and we'll start by using the autonomous node. Now, since I have already added the search knowledge card, all I have to do is give it instructions. So for example, I've told it you are a chatbot for a fruit shop. All questions asked to you are about the fruits at my shop. You must query all user questions using the knowledge base card attached below. Now, if we go ahead and ask a question, we can see if it works. So I've actually had to make a change in the knowledge base due to it failing to answer the question accurately for the exact reason that I had explained to you, which is that when you have a knowledge base that's disorganized or that's a bit bundled up, the bot kind of finds it hard to understand what you mean at each section. So I've had to reformat it and kind of tell the bot apples cost this, banana cost this, strawberry cost this, etc. And you can see over here it said that the price of oranges at the shop is $2.4 per unit sourced from Spain. So if we just double check that information, you can see that over here oranges cost 2.4 and are sourced from Spain. You can do the same thing using a standard node. So you create the standard node down here, and then you would connect that to the start, and like we mentioned earlier, we would query the user's message in our query card. So we can start by adding the query card right away, and in here, instead of adding a variable, we can just use one of Botpress's default variables. This is the event.preview variable. So this variable will always store the user's most recent message, and you can see it's already saying how much are your oranges because that's the most recent message that I sent into the bot. So wherever you are in the conversation, wherever you are in terms of workflows, or wherever you are in bot logic, the user's most recent message will always be stored in the event.preview variable. So we can just use that over here instead of having to create a variable. And then we can store the answer in workflow.answer and output that as a text card down here. So once that's done, all we have to do is start a new conversation and then just go straight ahead into asking the question, how much are your oranges? and it will take that message, which is the user's most recent message. It will query that using this card, and it will store the response in the answer variable, and then we can now output the answer variable as a text, and you can see that over here. The next thing that I'll go over are the agents. So if you come over here on the left, you'll see this little bot icon. These are the agents that your bot has access to. So there's a personality agent, which basically allows you to give your bot a personality that it will fine tune all its outputs to. There's a knowledge agent, which you will probably want to have on and never turn this off, because if you do turn it off, then your bot will never be able to answer questions using the knowledge base. So it's the knowledge agent that allows your bot to access its knowledge base. Then we have the summary agent. This generates some conversation summaries, but I usually have this off because I find it as an unnecessary use of my AI spend. It uses AI to do that. Next, we have the policy agent. This enforces certain policies for each and every single response that the bot outputs. So over here is where you put something such as should not talk about competitors, so that anytime the bot accidentally outputs a message about competitors, the policy agent would step in before it reaches the user and correct that. Next, we have the translator agent. This allows your bot to translate the user's input into a different language and then also output it as a different language. So basically, let's say you have users that chat with your bot in French. The bot will be able to translate their input from French into English, process it, and then output that back into French as well. So this basically just makes your bot multilingual. Lastly, we have the vision agent. This allows your bot to read and understand images that are input into it by the user. So this allows it to basically break down an image into a very accurate description that it can then process and use to do whatever you want it to do. The only one that I'll be demonstrating today, apart from the knowledge agent, is the personality agent. So I've given it this description. You are a dramatic chatbot who always makes even the simplest of messages seem dramatic. You are very energetic and use a lot of emojis. And then you can also select a model that you want to handle the bot personality. So this will allow you to choose which LLM you want to always be stepping in and adjusting the bot's response to fit the personality. So now if you come back into the emulator and you input the exact same message you asked before, you'll see it will automatically adjust that to fit the personality. So you just saw that quick change. That was the personality agent stepping in to make the adjustment. And you can now see what it has output, something a little more interesting. Behold, the price of oranges, a dazzling 2.4 USD, and then the little cool emojis there as well. Now that I've spoken a bit on LLMs, I'll cover them completely. When we come over here to your bot settings, you have the option to select the LLMs that power your bot. Now you have 5 options over here. The first one is the default fast LLM. This is the LLM that your bot will use when it wants to perform a task at the highest speed possible. Then there's a default best LLM, the model that your bot will use when it wants a high quality response. This is the autonomous language model down here. This is the model that your bot will use for any autonomous node that you have inside your workspace. But then you also have the RAG language model, which is the model that will be used when your bot is accessing the knowledge base and answering questions. And lastly, we have the fallback LLM. Basically, this is used in the case that any of these don't work. So let's say by chance that the default fast LLM does not work because GPT servers are offline, it would automatically fall back to whatever you have down here. So I'd recommend that you don't set this as the same as this, because then in the case that this jams, it would mean that this has also jammed. But if this is different, this can fall back onto something else that is likely still up, keeping your bot online for the short period of time that this LLM might be down. Of course, when you click on this, you'll probably get overwhelmed like I did when I started building on Botpress. There are so many LLMs to choose from, and it's honestly difficult to pick the right one. My favorite ones right now are GPT-5 Nano because it's low cost and has pretty good reasoning, as well as Cerebrus's Llama 3.18b because this one is incredibly cheap but has fairly decent reasoning. And then Gemini 2.5 Flash and 2.5 Pro have amazing reasoning and are kind of at a medium price. But if you want to go for the best reasoning possible, that's GPT-5, but it's also the most expensive as well. And you can go ahead and try out all these other LLMs, just test them out at different stages. You'll find that some work for different tasks, others are cheaper, and others are faster when you're chatting with a bot. So you kind of need to pick a balance between those three categories and find what works best for your project. Now, what makes Botpress the best chatbot building platform in the world, in my opinion, is the ability to connect it with other platforms as well. So if you come over here to the Explore Hub section, you can see that there are all these different integrations that pop up. So these basically allow you to connect your bot to other software and use it to perform actions or communicate with other software and kind of connect them so that they go hand in hand. So if an action happens on Airtable, something could happen in Botpress. If something happens in Botpress, something could happen in Acumatica, etc. So you can just scroll through these and find what you're looking for. However, if you're not able to find it, you can always request an integration by scrolling to the bottom and hitting request, and they will likely build it for you depending on which software you're looking to build it with. However, you can also build your own integration if you want to. So just check out the Botpress docs, search up Botpress docs, build an integration, and you should be able to see the clear instructions to building your own integration, which will probably require a bit of programming knowledge. Coming back into the Explore Hub section, we'll be looking at channels. So channels are basically integrations that allow your bot to chat on different platforms. So for example, WhatsApp is a channel, Instagram is another channel, and it basically allows your bot to send messages and receive messages over Instagram. But you'll see things like Salesforce, you might see Notion, you might see many other channels that you can connect your bot to and have your bot active on, as well as the most popular channel, web chat, this one over here, which basically allows you to install your bot on a website and have it interact with users over there. So that's basically it for building on Botpress. The last thing that I'll be showing you in this space is this button up here. This is perhaps one of the most important buttons. It basically allows you to publish your bot so that users get the most recent version that you've created or built in here. So if I'm to select this button and then hit publish changes, it will publish whatever I've done here, and the latest update, meaning the latest paths that you've drawn out, the latest nodes, the latest cards that you've put in here is what will be published, and that's what users will have access to. Therefore, if you publish the bot like this and try chat with it, you will not get the hello my name is testbot, because it has not been published in that state. It has been published in the state where the path flows down this way. This is a key feature that you need to remember, because every single time you make a change inside your bot, you need to make sure that you hit publish at the end so that the users get the most updated version of the bot. Otherwise, they'll just be getting a version that's older and you'll have the newest thing only in your workspace. Once you've published your bot, you'll also get a little link over here. When you copy this, you can paste it over here in your browser, and it's basically now the web chat feature, allowing you to chat with your bot over web chat. However, if you come back into your bot's workspace, you should be able to find a place that allows you to integrate your bot as a chat icon on a web page as well. So you can share this link with other people and have them test the bot. If you're an agency or if you're a freelancer, you can share this with your client and have them test the bot before you actually integrate it to their systems. You can also download a file of your bot. I would recommend that you do this every once in a while, just to have that extra layer of backup. So all you do is click this icon in the top left and then hit export, and you can export that bot to your laptop. However, if you want to now re-import that bot into another workspace, or let's say you have an issue with this one and you want to re-import that previous version, all you have to do is come in here and select import from file. But as you can see, it says that it will overwrite everything in this current bot. So you have to be very certain that this is what you want to do before you select the bot archive, which is a file that you should have downloaded before, to upload and basically import that version as the latest one into your bot. So that's it, we're done. Those are the basics of Botpress for you. So you're now ready to begin building your bot on Botpress. If you're a business owner, I'm doing a free demonstration call where I build a mini chatbot for your business, giving you a feel of how everything would work. So if you'd like to see that, it's all free. Just head down below to the video description, click on the Calendly link and book yourself an appointment. Once again, it's free, it won't cost you anything. So book an appointment and I'll reach out to you with a way forward. If you're an agency owner or a builder on Botpress and need some help with a project, I'm open for partnerships as well as for consultation. So all you have to do is, with the same link, book a session. I'll reach out to you and we can plan around that to see the way forward. You can also send an email to info@ivyflowdma. The email will be in the description as well. I build bots on Botpress that actually convert leads, and I share all my insights, all my tips, and all my tutorials on my YouTube channel. So go ahead and subscribe right now so you don't miss out on any of the new videos. You can also follow the link in the description to follow me on LinkedIn, where I share my entrepreneurship journey and where I also share insights on Botpress and quick tips to make your bots convert more leads on the daily. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.